Okay, so we're on to class number 2. So I have 12 of them to get through here, so I'm going to start with Brianna. So let me actually check and make sure you don't have a revision, because I know you did. No. I know you did a revision. I guess you haven't put it in the folder yet. So let's go ahead and drop this into Photoshop here and talk about some of the elements of it that we could work on a little bit. So I know you've already worked on some of this, and I like what you're getting out of it. I think right here you could probably roll up on the toe a little bit, and so you get a bit more like this, and that'll allow you to push over that foot a little bit. So I've been trying to figure out, like, I know you're going for something very specific right here, and I know this isn't the final version, but still I may be able to offer some help. I actually really love the way she jumps out of screen. I almost want to see the landing and like the next few poses of that. But having said that, I also understand like that's not part of the animation. I think for this push out through here, I think the answer is still in the hips, like this mass right here, right? And if we watch how that moves forward, it's moving forward. She puts that foot way out in front there, right? And so that means this is her two base of supports, and this is her hips in the middle, right? So the gravity's here. These two are pushing up this way. And so what this back leg's purpose is, when it pushes, is to try to get her over this front foot. And I think part of what's feeling kind of weird is that it never quite does that. Right? It gets it to right there. But if she were to push with that foot more and push up, her weight is still behind it. So I think one of the things that may help just ever so slightly is to just have this foot land a little bit further back here, around here, right? And that way you get a little bit of this, like this situation, right? And then that way when she gets her hips to here, she's over that foot. I'm being really messy here, right? And then that feels like she can push it forward. Now, the other thing is, if we watch the way the hips sort of stop right here, I think there's a little bit of an issue there. So if you notice that the hips are starting to slow down right here, but here's the base of support, right? And she has actually, like, her hips actually tip past that, right? And then start to slow down, right? So they wouldn't really start to slow their descent until after this foot is on the ground. So I think that you need to get this foot down maybe just a touch earlier to catch and slow that motion. And I think having it land a little further back here would probably allow that to happen. And now the issue with her pushing forward here, I think what you're going for is working, but when we talk about that sort of the central force, like what is the mass, or where is the energy coming from right now it feels like what you're wanting is to feel like her lower body is pulling her upper body forward, and it really feels like that spot right there is what's pulling her forward. And it's a real subtle change to make it there. And I think it would be the difference in like this curve and like more like this curve, like softening this bend a little bit more, like rolling it back. So it's really, again, really subtle changes that are going to result in that. And I think also just to clean up your silhouette, that back arm, just sort of break it out to this side a little bit, and try not to let things cover each other up too much in poses. So in this, maybe this arm goes up a little higher, or this arm goes down a little lower. Your hands have a couple of spots where I like that you're getting this drag and flip through, like right there, and then it kind of pops back out. It almost feels like it pops back out or goes a little too far back there, but I think try to find points where you can break up the way that they unfold and fold. Like right now, it's like the entire hand is back, or the entire fingers are back, the entire fingers are forward, and the entire fingers come back again, right? And then the entire fingers go forward again, right? And I think like having them kind of like having like maybe the pinky start to roll first and like the wrist kind of lead that motion a little bit, or vice versa. Maybe the pinkies lead that motion and the wrist comes a little bit later. Might help that a little bit. So the hands just feel just a touch like they're all moving together. And so you can just play with that a little bit. Overall, this is really pretty good. I'm kind of pointing out some small things to look for. And so I think I saw like right through here, that hand is just like a flat line. And so just turning it just a little bit to where we get to see the palm, you know, like that would help a little bit. I saw another spot like right here later where the hand kind of does the same thing. And a lot of that is just playing to the camera. Right now, she's far enough forward that I would also probably bring her up on her heel just a little bit. Right? So all of these are small things, really like tiny, nitpicky things. Because overall, the important parts, the poses are strong, the weight is pretty good, your timing is good. And so these are the type of notes that you want to be getting. This is like, you can make a small checklist of things. You can go through there and fix each of these in like, 15, 20 seconds each or whatever. And it just incrementally gets a little better and better and better. So yeah, great job on this. This has got some great personality. I think finding places to like mix up the timing would be interesting. I think your timing is actually pretty good, especially with this stuff that you have there. But it could be anything, just like maybe speeding up right through here, just this little like lunge forward. That way you get a little bit more of a hesitation here before she pops out. All right, so I mean, like little things like that, I think you could play with. None of that stuff is wrong. Like, it's not like I'm saying there's anything broken there. It's more like those are areas to explore, to plus the work, to attempt to make the work just a little more effective, right? So great work. Moving on, we'll go to, this is Brianna McDermott. Love the sound of this one. So, hilarious concept. I think that it's very funny in that like meme-ish sort of way. Like it's got a good humor for the time right now. And I like that some of the effects you've done in here intentionally, I think. Like this like flashlight look with the shadows, the clumsy framing, which is so common in stuff that's shot off of a camera, or I'm sorry, a phone. the sort of wobbly camera, and then when the lights come on, it's like it gets so bright. I think that those interesting and pretty smart decisions are hiding some flaws in the character animation. And I think that if we could get the character animation just a little bit stronger and still keep the flavor of those flaws while being able to see the animation a little bit better, it may be like don't quite trim the head as much, like get, a little noise in the camera, but, like right now we're missing, the hands and the arm and stuff like that. So I think that there are some things there to where the gag itself is preventing the audience from being able to actually see the animation. So I would focus a little bit on that. So let me show you some of the things that I'm noticing when I watch it. So one of them is that like spring back. Like I don't really feel like there's much in betweening at all happening there. It feels like there's key pose A, key pose B. Maya did all that, and I think that you need some of your hand in there. So if this is your pose, like, and then this is the other pose. At the least, I think you need a breakdown here that shows the source of that energy. Like his hips would raise, right? Maybe they would go up first, and maybe that would cause his chest to drag a little bit behind, right? And so maybe you'll start getting a little bit more like this as a breakdown pose. I think the elbows maybe would sort of start running away first, and so you get a drag in the hand, maybe. I know this is a kind of messy to see, right? And then maybe a little bit of drag in this hand too. And then the head would also be dragging, right? And so like you could probably get just like this breakdown pose somewhere in here that would add a little bit of drag to how he goes back. Right now it's just like arms just kind of raise up and they go from down to raised up. You also see sort of that same thing happening in the foot. Like the foot just from pose to pose just sort of drifts up. It goes from flat to up, right? And although I'm seeing, I think that there's some relatively strong poses in here. The transitions between those poses seem like they need some more offsetting. They need some more breakdowns. They need some more overlapping action to get that in there, right? So this foot, yeah, it would come up, but maybe it would stay flat on the floor as it pushed the character's weight upward, right? And then as he starts to tip back, it would tip back over like 3 frames or something instead of that slow progression from here to here, right? And it seems like you have him going back to this pose or to some new pose kind of quickly too. I think one of the things I would say is that I would keep it going just for another few frames, just so we get just a little bit of resolution to some of these motions. I think it's realistic in the way that it cuts early, and you lose some of the story there. That is like realistic to the media you're aiming for. But I think right now it's not helping your animation, and really in the end, that's the real goal for what you're trying to show in your work. Okay, so something I would check out here is starting with the beginning. It feels like that closest leg drifts, right? So it makes me think: is it got a keyframe on it, or is it changing? And then it drifts forward again. And at this point, we get IK pop where this knee goes perfectly straight and locks, right? And you can see when we say IK pop, what we mean is that the knee is bent, the knee is bent, the knee is bent, right? And then suddenly it goes perfectly straight and locks, right? And that's just an indication that we have gotten to the extent of the length of both of those two joints, right? So if your knee is bent like this, right, sort of naturally, it's got a little bit of bend in it. Once you get it perfectly straight, like, like this joint only has like a certain length. We'll call it 1. This length, it has the length of 1, right? And so while it's bent, this length may just be like 1.9 or something like that. It's not a full 2, right? Once you lock it out perfectly, right, then that's a length of 2, right? And it's not going to go longer than 2 unless the rig is set up to stretch. And so as soon as we get to that length of 2, then you get that pop, and the knee stays perfectly locked, and it feels very mechanical and computer generated. And so the trick is to never let it perfectly lock like that unless you absolutely have to. To always get just a very, very subtle, like leave it 1.99, 1.98 or something like that, instead of locking it perfectly at 2. And if you have to lock it perfectly at 2, you have to ease in to how that knee goes from 1.9 to 2, because otherwise you're going to get this snap. It has to ease in instead of popping in. And so you'll also see that how it comes out is it kind of pops out. Right? It doesn't ease out, it pops out. And so that's IK pop. We have to watch out for that. The foot in the back is kind of sliding and all the way forward, and then it kind of pushes forward. The weight, the character is falling down at the same time as that front foot, and so they both reach their destination at the ground at the same time, which wouldn't make sense because it's actually this foot, the foot that hasn't made it to the ground yet. It landing on the ground is what should slow the hip's descent, right? It's catching and pushing back this way, right? So and so you need to get that foot down there earlier. And then I think everything from there is that surprise, right? I think you also need a little bit of work on the spine. The spine feels like there's not a ton of animation on it. For the most part, your line of action, your spine is perfectly straight through the whole thing, right? And so you need to get a little bit of curving going on there, a little bit of bending in there, maybe there. Maybe here as he's sneaking, you could do that bend, right, like we just showed, or you could do the opposite, right? We could do more of the spin, right, to get some dynamic posing in there. Again, when we're talking line of action, that's going all the way through the body. Right now, most of the line of actions of these are perfectly straight. So that would be my 2 cents. Again, like the gag, the joke is pretty funny, but in terms of an animation, like an art director is going to sort of giggle at the gag, and then they're going to stare at the animation and analyze it, and they're going to find the same things I am. So I think you definitely need to put a little bit more work into the actual animation part too. So moving on to Miguel. Oh yeah. That's funny. So I think this is working really good. There's a couple of things I think that the timing and weight get off just a little bit. Right? Maybe not timing as much as like there may be a couple of extra poses that aren't 100% needed. So let's see, you trim some of it like that. Yeah. So I think you're. So here's my list of small things to watch out for, or small things that I kind of notice. But I want to start that with some of the things I really like. I love this, like, everything that's happening here. Like, you found this really neat little, like, cycle of emotions that is funny. You've put an interesting pose on his head, on his face, that, like, makes us think about his emotional state or mental state at that point. And that whole section is just funny. I think there's a couple, and actually working pretty well. There's a few spots, like right there, where that hand goes to the wall a little bit. And maybe a little bit of work you could do on the arcs, or maybe putting a little bit of different kind of drag on the hands. I actually really like the surprise too, like the little double take. You got a nice squash and stretch, right? And I think you even do some intentional overlapping action in the spine there, right? You got you get the upper chest to squash down, and then the spine goes up before the upper chest does, and then the spine comes down and drags the upper chest. I think it'd be nice to see that upper chest sort of continue its downward momentum and kind of squash and then pop back up a little bit right there at the end, and sort of settle, or instead of sort of easing in at the end. But otherwise, I think like that whole section's looking really pretty good. So great work on that. The few things that I kind of notice is like right here, that weight is off just a little too long. I think I get what you're going for, is you're trying to get the character out there kind of cartoony in this pose. But I think to pull that off, this foot needs to get down on the ground, or at least closer to the ground, a little earlier than it does. It kind of just hangs there in the air until the character's weight, like his hips, are already down, and that foot still hasn't completely touched the ground. So I think you need to sort of change the timing on that and get that foot down there a little earlier. It just hangs in the air too long through this step. And I think that some of your steps here, actually a lot of the issues in here are still in the steps. I think you could just do a little cleanup on the feet, and it's going to help some stuff. So like one thing, this foot still isn't completely planted, but that other foot's already kind of coming up. And sort of sliding a little bit. And so there's a frame or two right there in the middle that you're like, what is supporting him? Right? And actually that's really funny to watch him dance like that. And then you get this push off. So I mean, I think it's somewhat keeping those feet planted a little bit longer, or getting them to a planted state a little earlier. And that's not always going to line up. That's actually going to not line up with the hips key poses. It's actually what's driving the hips key poses, so it will be at a slightly different timing. Right. So you get a little bit of an IK pop right here. So you see that leg's stretched, and then suddenly it's bent. And you get that pop of the knee. You need to kind of ease that in a little bit. You can do that a little bit by rolling the character up on their toe. It's one of those things that, like, it's a spacing thing, and if like your knee is going from, bent to perfectly straight, right, then you're sort of tracking the spacing of that point, right, and so if the spacing is like that, that, and then suddenly perfectly straight, what we're feeling is that gap, right? For it to work, the spacing has to ease into this point, right? Like we have to have a frame right before it gets to perfectly straight that's there, and like kind of ease in like a bouncing ball at the top of its arc, right? It has to ease in to the top. This has to ease into straight, and so that's one of the last things you usually do is like go through and fix any IK pops that have resulted from any other changes you've made. You could do it earlier, but you'll probably have to go back and fix it again, just because any changes you make in the hips or curves at all will probably mess that up again. One of the things I usually do to fix it, though, is if you just roll the character up on their heel a little bit, Usually that'll add just a little bit of bend to the knee. The leg probably also has a stretch control that may help a little bit with that. And so I like these little foot shuffles here back to the wall. That's looking cool. Everything up to there looks cool. So the beginning part, really the biggest thing to me is just that weight and like the landing and some of the feet stuff. The only other really thing I notice is like right here at the end after the surprise, like it looks like there has a lot of thought in all of this and a lot of thought in the surprise, and then you're just like, well, I have to get him in front of that other block, and that just feels like kind of a transition to there. Like that doesn't really feel like an intentional step. So I think he needs a weight shift over this way, and that foot needs to make a more logical arc over to in front of there. I think you could sort of overlap some stuff, and you could go ahead and have his eyes start to lead down as that happens, like he's looking at the block, and that way you don't just sort of blend to this, right? So that step is just a little problematic. And then I think this step across, like I don't mind that he trips from his back foot, but I think it would help probably to have something happen with his front foot. And it could just be that there's like a little ledge on the front up here, and his front foot catches on that. I like this look of like anticipation on his face. Just because I paused on this frame, I'll point it out. Like you could probably do something just like pointing that elbow out a little bit like this. And what that'll give you is just a little bit of a right through there, a little bit of a negative space between his body and his arm, and that always helps us like clear up the silhouette just a little bit. So yeah, he needs a little bit of something to catch his toe on maybe, and then I think I would lead with the hips a little bit more. Like this pose here, I think you could make it stronger. Like you could, push the hips out here more, really drag the head back and get this line of action like this, because what you're going for is like that slap against the ground, right? You're going for him like that contrast of that. And so if that's him like fully on the ground with that line of action, I'll make these a little bigger. These are kind of hard to see. So if that's him fully laying on the ground with his line of action, then what's going to happen is his hips are going to go first, right? And they're going to hit first, and so then you're going to get sort of this with the line of action, and his head and his chest still haven't smacked, right? And then it's going to continue to flatten out even more, and then like his head is going to be the last thing that hits. Well, something you can do with that is like once his chest hits, right, like here, then where his butt has hit the ground, you could pop that up a little bit, right? Right now it feels like I like the poses where he's hitting the ground. And they're all bouncing up, but it all kind of feels like the whole body's posed and then bouncing up and then bouncing up. And so it just needs a little bit of offset on the different parts that bounce. A fall is actually kind of hard to animate, but once you sort of figure out your system of how you do it, it's almost like you have to, because it happens so quick, you almost have to straight ahead that a little bit. And I usually just figure what parts are going to hit first, because they're going to collide first, right? And then what parts are going to hit next. And then you have those hit next, but when those second parts are hitting, that means those parts that hit first probably should be bouncing just a little bit, right? And so you get a little bit of a, let me see if I can actually draw it off here to the side, right? So, floor. Why does it keep doing that? Okay, there. So like if this part's hitting first, and then I'm not gonna be able to do this because it's gonna, right? If that's doing like that, then this part may bounce out up, and then this part's hit, but then the ground part still hasn't hit. All right, let's see what that's doing. This is going to be clunky. And then at this next part, the head is hit maybe, right? But then the chest is bouncing up. Right? And so you're going to get so you kind of see what I'm saying, like the and I know it's bouncing all over the place, but you can kind of see. And then this part maybe will be on the next frame. Back down, so you got 3 of them on the ground, but the head is up, and then on the last one, the head is down. All right, so I know that was not, that's not making a lot of sense because it's bouncing all over the place, but hopefully that makes sense. Anyway, you can kind of use that as your example. To kind of make it feel like there's a cascading effect. So, all right, cool. Otherwise, this is looking good. These are all tiny notes of things that you can sort of push on it. So, yeah, nice work, Hannah. Okay, Hannah. Okay, watch it all the way through again. I'm just kind of scrubbing it first. Okay, so we talked about sort of some logistics of the shot, like what is the actual story or what is it you're trying to communicate. I think that, sorry, I'm grabbing my key out of my bag here, so sorry for the rustling noise. So I think part of the issue stems from the idea that, like in class, sometimes students think that they have to do more to get for it to be more successful, right? Like So I honestly think that I would consider trimming out that jump onto the box unless the jump onto the box has a reason, and right now it doesn't. And so like all the beginning of this, the story, the emotions make sense, right, up to here, and then she looks up and then suddenly she just jumps for some reason, right? And so that jump for some reason doesn't really make sense to me. I think that just needs to make sense in the story, because what happens is no matter how good this animation is, if she does something out of that doesn't make sense, then the illusion is broken, and suddenly we're like, oh yeah, we're watching an animation, not what's this character thinking, right? And we want to stay in that character's mindset. So I would either trim that out or turn it into something that is theme related or environment related here, right? So I think a couple of solutions could be, instead of having her jump onto a box, have her jump on, like have there be like a chasm or something here, and then another little ledge over here, or a crack or something like that she's having to kind of do a little hop over. So instead of having her jump up onto a box, have her do a little hop from one point to the other, right? And so the idea behind it is that she's just continuing to press forward through trying to find her way through this cave, right? If you wanted to really kind of push that a little bit more, when she looks up here, you could have her instead look a little bit more behind her, like toward over her shoulder, and see that there's more birds flying through here. And so what she's doing is trying to get away from the birds, right? Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston were friends with, or not friends, they were teachers for Brad Bird. And when Brad showed them something from The Incredibles, Ollie said something that he used to have written on his desk. He used to have like a little note that hung above his desk that said, what are the characters thinking and why do they feel that way? And that's something that he would keep next to his desk, because you should be asking yourself that at all times. And I think during this section here, like during the beginning half, like it's so clear. And so like, oh, she's nervous, she's lost, she's scared of that thing that just flew at her. And then here she's like, I don't know what she's thinking. And so I lose her, right? And so I think you definitely need to like sort of tweak that just a little bit. And I think it's easy. I think that you just change a few poses, and I think you change that jump to us. Like you would probably change these poses through here, right? But I think you could keep some of this off balance stuff. It's maybe a little too much, a little too exaggerated. Like she's trying to balance on one leg a little too long. So I'd trim some of that down, and just not make her jump quite as high. Like pretty much just changing that pose and trimming out some of this loss of balance, right? So that's more of posing storytelling notes. My animation notes on how to improve just like frame to frame stuff, is a little bit more about overlapping action and arcs. So I think that I'm going to hit play and just sort of look at the timing first. I think your timing is okay. The only thing that really feels a little slow to me is how quick she goes into the, how quick she reacts to that bird. Like that just feels a little slow to me, getting down into this. So I would make that like a lot faster, like twice as fast, right? Right now that like all of this feels a little not even, but like this is the right timing. Like it's sort of meandering, and then she does that gasp that's very quick, and that feels nice. And then I feel like you need to let that read just for a few frames, and then quickly pop her into this, right? But that's really my only timing notes. I mean, I think that the timing on this will probably change just a little bit once you make some adjustments to it. Most of my notes, I think, are going to be on the fact that it still feels like it's in sort of the blocking plus phase, right? Like you still feel like these are your main key poses, just sort of being blended by Maya. So little things like, let me find one here. Like the way her hips and that foot get to the ground at the same time, right? Or not get to the ground, but get to that pose at the same time, right? So really, right now she's off balance, right? She's like all of her weight is being supported by that foot, and so really all of this is off balance, and so she needs to get that foot out there as another base of support as early as she can, right, to get the rest of her in balance. And so maybe you need to shift her weight over that just a little bit while she reaches. But the biggest thing is she's got to get that foot out there before she can continue pushing her weight over, or at this point she would have just tumbled over, right? And that's just a timing change. That would just be changing the timing of that foot to getting it to that next pose, 5 frames early. Just, grab all those controls, shift those keyframes a little bit earlier. I think that shifting the frames for the feet and the hips are going to be a big help in this. Like just making those changes are going to drastically improve the work. After that, it's still more overlapping action and follow through. So stuff like her turn to here, right? Like maybe as her chest starts to turn, maybe her elbow drags behind a little bit. And so at least for the first few frames, maybe that arm doesn't start to travel up. Maybe it continues to drag behind and the hand drags up to her face, right? Maybe that like her chest and her head kind of turn back here at the same time. Maybe instead you start turning her head into that pose a little earlier and then have her chest follow by a frame or two. Right? What you're really trying to do is break up all these segments of the body to where they're not all moving together. Right? And that's a big part of making this feel looser and more natural. And it's natural because that's the the way physics works, right? One object moves because it's being influenced by another object, and so that means they are not moving at the same time. One moves first, and then the other one moves next. And sort of our job in the splining and polish stage is to figure out what's moving first and what's moving next. And right now, it just all feels like it's kind of moving together. So, the overlapping action part of this is an issue. I think that after you do that, it's an arc issue, right? All of the next few things that you would want to work on are arcs. I'm not finding a great example of an offender on the arcs idea, on the arcs issue. But let's just take sorry, let me see. Anyway, you've probably heard me mentioning this on other people's, and you're not really going to see this as much until you get all that offsetting in there. But little things like you put the controller on the end of her finger, do the editable motion trail on that, and what you may see is that it's going to generate this curve everywhere, and what we should be seeing are these really swooping, pretty elegant arcs. And of course, they're going to settle in spots and kind of hover for a little bit and then start moving again, right? But what you want to avoid is any spot where it's smoothly going and then suddenly you get one of those and then it does that. And so if you see that, then you have to go in there and fix that area. And that could be adjusting some curves and cleaning up something you overlooked, or it could be that's just something you have to manually go in there and adjust the arm to fix one sort of weird key pose that's messing up. That and the materials would be my biggest note. She's a little glossy, and I would maybe take some of that off her face and then fix her eye, which I think you mentioned that already. And then the last thing I would say is we haven't really talked that much about framing in this class, but I do think you need to sort of play around with the camera because we got a lot of unnecessary space over here. I'm not saying that has to be removed. I'm not I think you're trying to show some specific things about the environment, and in this case you may be able to do that. It's more like you still need something to pull our eye back in. So it's either play with the camera and get us a little closer in here on her so we can be thinking about what it is she's worried about. Maybe what you would do is you just lower some of these stalactites down a little lower, and you have a few of them, and you've moved the camera in a little bit. The other option is she's in a giant cave. You could have a rock here that kind of literally frames her and keeps her feeling trapped, right? So there's nothing saying you can't sort of use your environment to drive your framing. I know that right now you probably don't want to do too much modeling, and I can't blame you. I would just probably put some extra boxes in here to kind of frame that in, and the whole point is to kind of keep our eye focusing in on her, right? Okay, cool. So let's move on. Chris. The leopard. Pixel aspect ratio correction. I don't know what that was about, but this looks correct. So let's watch it. Yeah, it's playing just a little slow in Premiere, or in Photoshop. So let's watch it in here. Yeah, man. This is looking good. I really like what you got going on with a lot of this. It does feel like you could maybe use a little, I think I've said this already, you could use a little bit more side to side in this front set of hips just to get some countering. It kind of feels like how you've been doing this one, and I'm not sure that this is wrong. I think this may be a correct way, is you've kind of been layering your animation. You've done the feet and gotten them looking good, and now you're going to get the hips sort of reacting to that. I like the lead and follow on the head. I like that that the nose is kind of leading it, and that I think you could even accentuate that just a touch more if you wanted to. having the head a little bit ahead. One of the things you can do to that, or do for that, is whatever the up and down motion is on the head. I don't know if that's being caused by the neck or translate. If you have the rotate channels a frame ahead of that, then it will cause the rotation up to happen before the translation up happens. And it feels like you got some of that built in there, but you could still continue to add more. But I like that because it makes it feel like the thing that's pulling it forward is whatever it's smelling or looking at, right? Like its food devouring system is what is pulling this thing forward, right? And I like that. I feel like the transition from on the rear feet, the transition from being curled back like that to being fully straight again happens just a little fast or linearly one. And it may be that like you're getting your foot almost completely straight before it hits the ground. Maybe it's actually still curled a little bit like this as it hits the ground. And then that way you get to watch the weight cause it to flatten out. And then the tail, I think you got a good start on the tail, but the tail is one of those things that like you just save that to last. Like you just get that, you get that as close as you can, to kind of not be distracting. And then that's the last thing you kind of go in there and add in like that and like the eyes and, any mouth motion or something like that. I do think it needs a little bit of something going on in the mouth by the time it's over with, though. So it's looking good. Honestly, I don't have a lot to draw over on top of it. I think the few things I would say, I'll do some drawing on here just for reference reasons. If we're looking at this from above, like this is the rear hips, this is the chest, right, and then this is the head, right. The way this thing moves is all about sort of it's almost like a spiral or like an S curve that is traveling through this, right? And so there's going to be a little bit of like this causing, this to do this and this maybe to do this, right? And then in your next frame, it may be the opposite of that. It may be that it would probably be that this object here then would go over to here a little bit more, right? And so this would do this, and then this would do this, right? And so you're going to get this countering S curve that sort of goes back and forth between that. And I think as it walks, you're almost going to feel it like sine waving, like it's almost going to whip or like sort of like wave all the way down the body. It's going to be really subtle, but I think that bending of this part of the torso is important to show that these forces, like him pushing on the ground, those forces that are affecting the chest and the hips are really what's driving everything, and those fleshy parts and those organs are sort of just being warped by that energy. And so like the stomach, all of this area here that has some squishy parts in it are going to be affected by these parts that are all bone and muscle, right? And I think that's going to loosen up the middle just a little bit when you do that. So overall, great piece. I'm really excited to see how this one turns out when it's all done with. Scotty. Okay. I think that you got a lot of feedback in class about this wall, and I think if there's a way, I don't know, it bothers me, but it doesn't it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's a little distracting, especially when you got such an interesting little piece here in the beginning. Like I really love this stuff here. In fact, like it's actually the second part here that I'm not as crazy about. And if you, for my 2 cents, you could almost keep the character, like stop the camera here and just keep the character walking out of frame, and I would be happy with this piece. Without this stuff at the end. The surprise, I don't always get what's happening, and the timing is a little even on it and slow. Like there's some weight issues here. The characters, that's a space of support. All of that weight is out here pulling the character over this way, so he would fall. So you got to shift the character's weight over, and you got to make sure you're pushing and catching them with that foot as it moves. But I think that, I mean, if you want to leave that, that's cool. There's nothing wrong with it. I think you just have to find a way to not make this wall quite so distracting. And I think part of it is this frame. It's that's all we get of information. The frame right before it, we got enough, right? And so maybe it's just making the wall a little thinner. So what we get is like this part is still usable, and maybe we're already seeing our character come out the other side of the wall. So I think maybe just making that wall a little thinner may work. It may also work to just take the camera through the wall a touch faster. But either way, it's that frame right there. It's like you've heard me say in other classes, like it really can just be one frame that can cause a problem in an animation. So in terms of the character, I think you're having an issue that some other people are having, is that this still just feels like it's blocking or blocking plus. I'm sure you've done some stuff in the graph editor, but it needs a lot more on the offsetting and overlapping action, right? So a good example is like we got this pose, and it just felt like the entire character just blended from pose A to pose B. So what forces caused that action to happen? Right? Well, the character had to move their foot over to there. Right? Well, before that could even happen, that foot is supporting the character's weight. Right? Like that is part of the weight support. So before that could even happen, the character needs to shift his weight over this way just a little bit until he's over on this base of support to free this foot up, right? To be able to pick this foot up a little bit, right? And then start moving that over to here, right? Now, before the character's hips can get all the way over to there, like they are right now, right? That foot has to be there to catch them, right? And so that the hips and the foot are getting there at the same time, right? And so that sort of needs a little bit of work there. And then again, this back foot starts picking up while it's still supporting the character's weight, right? So that weight needs to be forward over this foot. And so all of those, I think, could be done a little bit with breakdown poses, but really it was that first level of splining where you have to figure out the graph editor for the hips and for the feet, and lining all of that up. And it's that most of your weight stuff is going to be solved in there. And so it feels like it just needs a couple more hours work. And that, once you get that done, you are then you're really just figuring out what's going on with the spine and the arms, right? And so your character's spine, I think you're getting good poses in here. I think it's the way it transitions into those poses, right? So like as he comes up to here, right? So we go from here where it's kind of curled forward. I think you could probably even exaggerate that a little bit more if you wanted to, right? Curling forward a little bit more, right? And then as it comes up to here, you're kind of going straight. And so like if you really wanted to push it a little bit more, you could even exaggerate that more and maybe almost roll him back a little bit, right? Like almost get his head or chest back a little bit. And so if you're doing that, then you're going from this line of action curled forward where the character is sort of, let me draw a line of action in a different color so you can see it. So you're going from this line of action where the character is bent forward here, and we're getting this shape. Let's try green. Getting this shape, right, to being backwards or at least straight, where we're getting a little bit more of this shape, like curled backwards. You're going from concave to convex, right? And so if you're going from concave to convex, then that means your breakdown in between, right, needs to feel like the lower half of this is what's causing that flip at the top, right? So maybe what your breakdown would be is something more like that, right? Like the lower half is already that, and it's pulling the top half up behind it, right? And you're going to get that whip action at the top of that. So, and I think getting some drag in the head on stuff like this, like right now the head's just kind of drifting down, like right in here. Just drag the chin back a little bit more to where you get like, there we go. You get just a little bit more of this, like the head sort of following through, right? And I think that just doing some of that's gonna really help. So, all right. I think that after you've done that, you need some drag in the arms. The arms just kind of go with it, and so as the chest is moving, maybe it takes the arms a little bit of time to catch up, and so they sort of drag behind. So it just needs a little bit of that all across it to loosen it up. Like I said, this is usually the lack of overlapping action, and stuff like that in it right now usually means that a lot of your keys are still right on top of each other. And some of it's just going to be fixed with offsetting, and some of it's going to be fixed with, using the graph editor more. And some of it you just have to go in there and make it happen with a little bit of additional posing. So, awesome. Let's move on. How are we doing time-wise? I've recorded for about an hour. We're about halfway through. I'm going to go ahead and stop just to break this video up, because otherwise we're going to hit 2 hours on it. So, stop recording. I'll be back here in just a minute, starting with Jeff. So, thanks.